Yes.
Yep.
All right. Let's go ahead and get started. Go ahead and call to order the Public Safety Committee meeting for January the 27th being held virtually. Kelly, can we have roll call, please?
Sure. Chairman Lockmiller,
Here.
Alderman Plufka,
Here.
Alderwoman Ebling,
Here.
Alderwoman Sims.
Here.
All members are present.
Thank you. Move on to approval of the agenda. Any changes to the agenda? Seeing none, can we just approve by acclamation? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Move on to citizen comment. Kelly, do we have any citizens?
We do not have any citizens in the gallery.
Okay, thank you. Move on to city administrator report. Bola, I think you have something for us.
Thank you, Alderman Lockmiller. Earlier this week, I received an email from Chief Spees providing an update on the law enforcement vaccine schedule. Perhaps Chief Spees, I thought maybe I saw him in there.
He was, and then he's not. Oh, there he is. They're in there. Yep.
Do you want to share what we know about the vaccine schedule for public safety, police, starting off with police?
We just received it for the law enforcement side. We have the option of going at first to St. Louis University Hospital starting next week. There's a little glitch in the sign-up system for us in Brentwood. Brentwood wasn't included initially, but they're fixing that. We're probably looking at in the next 7 to 10 days, it'll be available for the officers here in Brentwood that want it. And then, of course, followed up with the second shot a couple of weeks later.
Any questions on that? No?
Any questions?
The second update, we also received an email from St. Louis County Homeless Services Department, their coordinated entry manager, and they want us municipalities to know that on January 28th, between the hours of 6 a.m. and 8 a.m., their personnel, along with the St. Louis County Police Department and other local service providers, will be conducting a census of what they called our unhoused neighbors, which is homeless people in general. I know that over time, we know that we have seen individuals that fall into this category in Brentwood. I don't know the number of those that we have. Hate to put you on the spot, Chief Spees, but can you confirm or deny that we do have individuals that fall into this category?
We do have homeless people. Occasionally the officers will encounter them either through a radio assignment or just in their travels during patrol. Just as an example, there's some occasionally we'll see an encampment down by the Metrolink tracks. We certainly have panhandlers we get calls on, and we see a lot of the challenges that we face with the panhandling is that the courts are ruling over and over again that law enforcement can't arrest people as long as they're following certain rules in terms of panhandling. So that doesn't mean that these folks that are out panhandling are a real challenge in terms of their homelessness. So St. Louis County has some options on shelters, but often they're full. And this is actually, Angie and I talked about this last week when we got this note that Bola told you they sent out. They have an officer, county does, that is paying attention to the homeless problem throughout St. Louis County. It is only one officer, but at least it's a start towards trying to get some help for these folks outside of what law enforcement's typical response would be, and that's to take them to a shelter, or if they're breaking an ordinance, arresting them for an ordinance violation. So I think it's a great idea. The county's trying to get something together. At this point, it's pretty early to see exactly what they want us to do. Angie and I talked about it, and whatever help that we can give them in the Brentwood area, we'll certainly do that.
Thank you, Chief Spees. That's my update.
Okay. Could I just ask one question on that? And I guess I would ask of Chief Curtin, does the department have any run up against any of the homeless needing help or anything of that nature, medical?
I have not heard of anything recently. We had a gentleman that lived down off of Manchester for quite a few years, and we were involved with his care numerous times when he was a resident of Brentwood. And he was since successfully rehabilitated, rescued, whatever, by our police department, and they found him some help and I believe turned his life around. I haven't heard a word recently, so that's several years old, but hopefully he's still on a good track. But that's the only one that I know of that we ran any kind of frequency on. I've not heard any scuttlebutt or any conversation about any other regular homeless folks in Brentwood.
Yeah, I believe that was Johnny.
Yes.
That's correct, yeah.
I hope you're doing well. All right, thank you. Move on to reports of committee chair and alderman. I just have one thing, and just to make this committee aware, in the Public Works Committee, Dan presented an item that we're going to that was forwarded onto the board, and it's to engage TWM in applying for an STP grant for sidewalk improvements along High School from Manchester Road all the way down to the high school to White Avenue. And I think, you know, something maybe we need to put in the back of our minds when we're applying for those type of grants is some of these traffic calming issues maybe can be deployed. There are things, and if maybe we'll talk about this later on when we get to traffic calming. But there are things that narrow streets and intersections to kind of slow people down instead of using speed tables or speed cushions. And, you know, if we can apply for a grant and have those incorporated into the grant, you know, I think all the better. And I would guess, and Dan, you could reply to this, if you're applying for a grant and there's, you know, a crosswalk involved, a lot of public safety features, I mean, is that a box they check off when East-West Gateway's looking at approval of a STP like that?
They do look at traffic counts. They look at crash data. I know police gave us information for high school. You know, they look at a lot of factors. For that one, I think it'll score better than it did years ago when we applied, only because, you know, we've got plans through, you know, MoDOT for improving Manchester Road. Before, there was nothing at Manchester. And then also it feeds into Litzinger and it connects to the high school, and the high school's made a bunch of improvements. It'll, you know, basically connect there at White.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, I know at our
yeah.
ward meeting last night, a couple people had concerns about that crosswalk at Harrison and people speeding down the hill of high school right there. So, you know, I'm just thinking, you know, going forward, if when we're applying for these grants, if, you know, improvements to crosswalks or, you know, just regular traffic calming issues can be employed into that grant request, I thought maybe that would be a way to solve some of our traffic calming issues on different streets and maybe check a box that make us look more favorable for a grant. All right. That's all I had on that. David, do you have anything?
I don't, thanks.
Pat?
No, I don't have anything. Thanks.
Sonny?
No report.
All right. Move on to department reports. Police department. I guess you're back up, Chief.
Sure. Thank you. I'd like to start with just a couple things of interest on the crime report. Well, crime's relatively low in the last couple of weeks. There were a couple of cases of interest. On the 14th of January, we had an Asian guy that was duped out of quite a lot of money off of a phone call saying that he was, if he didn't pay money, he was going to be extradited back to Hong Kong. And he sent $17,000 in his bank account back to Hong Kong. Shockingly, a little while later, they called back and said, well, if you don't send another 50, we're really going to come get you. So luckily, he called the police after that. So thought that was interesting, some of the things that people do and send money in cases that you just are shocked by their the things that they opt to do. We had a couple robberies during this period. One on the 4th was listed as a robbery of a cell phone. A guy was trying to sell a cell phone, kind of on Craigslist. It's a different service called OfferUp. When he got there, the guy pulled a gun on him, routed on the cell phone, and our detectives are working on that case. They've, I believe they've got some line on the suspect in the case. So isn't the best victim in the world, but they're working on that case. The second one was a security guard that is listed as assault first degree and later as a robbery off of a theft where the guard threw herself in front of a car, basically. And she was struck lightly by the car. Wasn't injured, but the case is listed as a felony assault, so you may have seen it in the crime report as well. Another thing out of the crime that we're dealing with is, and it's not just Brentwood, it's all over our area. There was a group of guys that are running around with Illinois plates on 3 or 4 of their stolen cars. And they're going in mainly during the day into our retail areas, and they're breaking windows and stealing all kinds of stuff out of cars. In the last week, they've been able to steal 3 handguns out of vehicles. So that gives you a little clue why they're doing what they're doing. So people just keep leaving guns in their cars. They're going into gyms and shopping stores and things like that. These guys come in, they pop windows with crowbars, and they break out windows and steal packages laying on the seats. They have, this license plate's been hitting our license plate recognition service all through Brentwood, Richmond Heights, and it's really been hitting up in North St. Louis County. So that's probably where this particular crew is from. So again, our detectives are working on that. We have had several incidents in Brentwood, mostly daytime, mostly in our retail areas from those guys. So we're working on that as well. One of the things I was going to mention to you, you may see if you looked at our crime report closely, that we have asked our officers, instructed our officers to quit calling out on contracted patrols. When I got here as chief about 3 years ago, we started the contract patrol callouts as an accountability tool so that we could show you as elected officials and the citizens that the officers were in each of these 7 areas that we designated as neighborhoods in Brentwood. One of the issues there was that ECDC was initially was charging us for each call. Vola worked on that with us through the board of directors at ECDC, and they quit doing that. Recently, like in the last few weeks, there's been a discussion at ECDC that they're now probably going to start charging for contract patrol callouts. If you put a dollar sign on this, it's about $48,000 a year extra that we pay if we have to pay it. So we immediately instructed our officers to stop that call out. This doesn't affect officer safety. It doesn't affect neighborhood safety. They're still required to ride in the neighborhoods. We can show through our GPS tracking of the vehicles where they're at and what they're doing. This was just another manner that we could use as an accounting tool. And really it was for, because of the issues that we had 3 years ago with the officers riding the neighborhoods, it was just another way to show you what they were doing. So it's not in any way jeopardizing anything we're doing, but you will not see that on your reports going forward as a call for service, just so you're aware of that. We talked about the COVID update. All of our officers now are back. Our last one came back about 10 days ago. She was out about 10 days. As we stand right now, there are no police officers in Brentwood that are affected by COVID actively sick. So we've had our share, but right now we're doing well. And hopefully as we move toward the vaccination process, we'll continue to do well. The last thing I was going to talk about was traffic enforcement. And this has been a topic that's been very popular over the last few months. We're getting a lot of comments on social media regarding our efforts to slow people down, in particular in areas, Rosalie, High School, Litzinger, and McKnight really are the 4 areas that we constantly get complaints on. So Major Hawkins and I have made a decision for the next 30 days or so, might end up being 3 weeks instead of 4, to have an officer dedicated to a traffic detail. And I'm going to have Angie explain to you exactly what Wilcox is doing. But we're going to evaluate it after a period of time, whether it's 3 or 4 weeks, and just kind of take a look at what effect it has, how many tickets are being written, and then kind of measure that and make a decision going forward on whether or not we'll do our best to try and assign an officer to a traffic detail. Just before Angie tells you what he's doing, there were some questions about where we're drawing from. Hey, there's nowhere to draw from except the line platoon. So the platoon that had 5 officers, Angie took one of them off of that platoon. So what suffers there are calls for service and patrol. So if we have an officer that's dedicated to traffic, he or she will be obviously be in the neighborhoods that we direct them to. But we lose that piece of patrol throughout Brentwood, and we lose that ability for them to assist in radio assignments and things like that. So it's just a decision we make for 3 or 4 weeks, and now we're going to evaluate it. So Angie, you want to tell elected officials exactly what he's doing?
Sure. Alex is a great pick for this, by the way, because he has a good sense of, a good amount of common sense, I suppose I should say, which is actually really crucial for us when we try to respond to these complaints, because inevitably we will be running across folks who are residents and people who do a few miles over the speed limit or legitimately, barely mostly stop at a stop sign, but not really. You can see where common sense comes into play there so that the officer can use their discretion to make a reasonable decision. So Alex is a really good choice for that. I wanted to say that right out of the gate. What I told him was, here's what we want you to do. We want you to work Monday through Friday, because a lot of the traffic we get in Brentwood is pass-through traffic, whether it's on our major thoroughfares or even into our residential areas, let's say our high school, Rosalie. Those are all places where we see a high volume of cut-through traffic, especially as Dan's study showed. And I sent him basically a list of what complaints we've received and where those complaints have been addressed, basically. And he knows exactly what complaints are where and what needs to be done in each place. He knows that speed and stop signs on Rosalie is a big ticket issue right now. He knows that commercial vehicle traffic and stop sign violation, and occasionally when traffic's not very congested, speed on McKnight. Just to give you an idea, I sat down with him on Monday and probably had an hour-and-a-half conversation with him on each location that I had sitting in front of me. And throughout his few weeks, what he's going to do is he's going to alter his schedule so that some days he's going to work early in the morning so he captures morning rush hour traffic, which Alderman Lockmuller, as we heard last night, high school was an issue for early morning traffic and speeders, and he spent some time up there today and he was able to make several stops, which has been really good. I think that responsiveness is huge. And we can take him and right after a ward meeting, I can call him in the next day and say, hey, Alex, last night, here's what I heard. This area of high school needs some attention. Lo and behold, he goes up there on a day that's snowing, of course, snow sleeting, and is able to do, I think he did 4 stops up there today. So in terms of continuing his schedule, I told him he's very, he may remain flexible if he'd like. So if he wants to hit the afternoon rush hour, he can do so as well. And he's given me a very tentative list of his hours for these dates that he's going to be working, but he does so that he's chunking his time to cover high traffic times throughout the city, both morning, afternoon, and evening, which I thought was really, really smart of him, because some of our complaints in varying areas occur at different times of the day, as we've seen. I've also told him, please don't forget about our main thoroughfares. You still have your Hanleys and Eager and Brentwood, Manchester, and occasionally he'll do roving traffic where he's driving from spot to spot and he'll conduct traffic on his way versus just sitting at a location. And what I like about that is the visibility piece, because then passerbys see Brentwood officers engaging in traffic enforcement. And I think that was also another complaint we've heard over the past couple of months from some of our citizens, is that you don't see our officers on major thoroughfares. So we had that discussion as well. A third piece to this is that he is connected to the residents who have complained. So we have residents on Rosalie who were very concerned, residents on High School who were very concerned, Pine. I could go on. I think there's about 8 or 10 locations. And from the information I have and the context I have gathered, I've basically forwarded that on to him and I said, here are some phone numbers, here are some addresses. These people are interested in what we are doing to address their concerns as they should be. And he's going to reach out and he's going to talk to these residents and say, hey, here's who I am, here's what I'm doing. What else can we help you with? What else have you noticed? What do you think would be a good idea? And really, really engage the residents from the enforcement standpoint at least. And additionally, I've sent out a mass email to a bunch of people who've sent complaints or concerns in the past several months. And I've basically introduced them to Officer Wilcox, copied him on that email and said, hey, please be in touch with him if you need to be, if you want to be, and let us know through these channels. Again, to a point that that Alderman Lockmuller made last night at the ward meeting, through the proper channels so that we know what's going on, what complaints you have. We need to know about them so we can address them effectively. And he's already made several contacts with residents that have gone over very, very well. They're pleased to see him in the neighborhoods, and they're thrilled to see that we're being responsive to their complaints in that regard. As the chief said, this is kind of a, we'll try this out for several weeks and we'll see how we do with him. So, but if there's any questions to him or what he's doing.
No, I find it pretty exciting. Is there going to be some type of formal, evaluation and maybe if the ticket's written and presented to us here at the committee through this trial period?
We will do that. As he's put together a report, and as we gather all the data, we'll give it to you. We can do it at a public safety, the next public safety committee meeting. Actually, would be a good time to do it. Mm-hmm. That's right about the time when we're going to be wrapping up the first version of this, so we should have it done.
Any questions from committee members on this? The only other comment I'd make, I guess, for instance, and Dan's going to mention this later on, when we're trying to get some stats from the data collector, I think the last thing we want is a police car parked underneath it. I think we want to kind of get the feel for what's the typical usage. For, like for instance, right now, I believe Dan's going to tell us there's one on Litzinger. We're trying to get a volume count and everything like that. And I wouldn't want to cloud that data. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. The good thing is about here in this particular situation is that it's actually very difficult for our officers to find a safe spot to sit on Litzinger and run traffic. So that's not a very frequent area we're able to do just because of availability of safe locations. So I'll make a note of that though, Alden.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, I guess we'll move on to fire department. Chief Curtin.
Thank you, Alderman Lockmuller. I want to start off with just a couple of housekeeping items that I've been trying to keep everybody in the loop on with COVID. Right now, we have no one out with COVID other than our one employee who's been out since August. I heard this week that he was rebounding fairly well from the last treatment he had, so that was very positive. It remains to be a sort of day-to-day thing with him. But in terms of severity of his illness, I think he's very stable at this point. And so in terms of something drastic happening, I think we're past that point. But it continues to be just a daunting task to get him over the hump. So we'll keep you posted on that process as it continues. And the next thing I wanted to share was that we have had 3/4 of our workforce essentially has received the first round of vaccine and is scheduled for the second round in a couple weeks. There's 26 or about 1/4 of our department that chose not to or could not receive the vaccine due to timing with the vaccine and either a COVID exposure or a previous vaccine that they may have received before we knew that the COVID vaccine would be available. So there's a few folks that have not been vaccinated as of now. Shifting gears, the new ambulance, we got a report on that last week that production began on the 18th, and we should see it in Brentwood sometime in April. I don't have anything more firm than that, but that was exciting to hear that we got past design and engineering and we're in production. So that's exciting. I also heard word this week that our Missouri GEMT reimbursement has been calculated, and it's somewhat lower than last year, but it's directly tied to the volume of Medicaid patients we transport or treat. And overall calls are roughly down 20% this year, with, I believe, is due to COVID, and it's had a direct effect on our GEMT reimbursement. Last year we collected about 104,000 after fees. This year we're going to be right under 60. So, but it's money that we didn't have before we started it, so I think it's still a positive thing. And then the next thing we learned about, right in the end of December before the holidays, I heard from a resident, I heard from a resident's brother that his sister had received excellent care from us, but he'd never received a bill. And he was curious if I could follow up on that so that he could take care of that. He's her power of attorney. So we found out through contacting our billing company that Anthem Insurance, and it's not the entire line of Anthem Insurance, it's different policies within there, and it just depends upon which policy you have, is now no longer paying our billing company directly on behalf of a patient in Brentwood. They are sending the patient directly the payment. So we did not realize this until this gentleman brought it to our attention, and we started trying to dig into this and found out that it's becoming a new trend within Anthem. And so we kind of tried to put our heads together and figure out how to best approach this, looked at our ambulance billing policy, and according to that, we have the ability to bill our residents for payments that they receive directly towards their ambulance care. But I want to just make sure we're clear, it would only be for the benefit that their insurance company pays. So if they have $1,000 bill and their benefit's only $500, that's all we're going to bill them, just like we would on any other case. So I just want to make that clear. But what we're proposing to do with that billing is, let me back up. So in 2020, we had 18 trips that this affected that we're aware of, and we did not receive payment for those services, and it added up to roughly $15,000 in gross totals. I'm speaking with the billing company. Their best estimate was about $7,500, or half of that amount, after all the allowances and collections process was done. So we're still leaving a fair amount of money on the table. So what we're proposing is that we would like to go ahead and proceed with sending an invoice to our residents when we know that they receive payment from Anthem. And the way we find that out is our billing company receives an explanation of benefits on behalf of them, indicating that they paid the patient directly. I've reviewed their invoices, and they had their initial invoice that addresses this condition is very gentle, and it's kind of gives some explanation on how to approach it. The next step would be just a second notice, and then at that point, what we're proposing is dropping it. Not sending anybody to collections, just simply dropping it, but making an effort for 60 days. Oh shoot, I lost my train of thought. So at this stage of the game, that's kind of where we're at on this. I really wanted to just make you all aware of this and make sure that there were no questions. I didn't want anybody to receive phone calls without some sort of an education on what this was. I know what the last piece was. We are going to work with Janet Levy and create some information that we can add to our website tab that explains this in more detail and uses some of the invoices as examples for the residents to refer to if they have questions. So there is an educational piece for the residents as part of this. So in closing on that item, I just wanted to make sure that you all were aware of this situation. Mr. Chairman, do you want me to entertain questions on this if there are any, or just finish the report and then do it?
No, let's go ahead and tackle this issue.
Okay.
Any questions? Or go ahead, David.
I just had a question, mostly a clarification. Chief, are you saying that you're going to wait on this billing on past trips? You're going to wait until you understand exactly what these folks were paid and then tailor your bill to that payment?
Yeah, so the way I see this unfolding, Alderman Plufka, is we will go through our normal billing process. Our billing company, once given permission to do this, will flag our account. And when they get an EOB back for a patient that's gone through this process, that's a Brentwood resident, it will indicate to them that they have received payment directly from Anthem. At that point, they usually show the amount they were paid. And so the only thing that I'm going to do is instruct our billing company to pay them what their insurance benefit will pay on their behalf, nothing more. So it would be the standard process that we're doing every day today, is not taking any more than what the insurance benefit will pay. Does that answer your question?
To some extent. Are you saying that there would be two bills sent to the resident then? The first bill reflecting our charges and the second bill tailoring our collection to what they received in payment?
My understanding is that we won't send a bill until we know that this has occurred. And that this is new, so I don't have the details of every step from the billing company, but we're working through that. And I want to make sure that our residents receive minimal paperwork, and we try to make this as easy on them as we can possibly do. To sit here and tell you the exact process today, I'm a little rusty on, because we haven't gone that far yet. We're working through that.
Okay, but it seems like you're saying that you won't generate a bill to a resident until you know that they were paid, and presumably within that paperwork, you're going to figure out how much they were paid.
That would be my hope.
Okay.
Sitting here today, it would be my hope that it goes that way. The good part is I will be authorizing this for the billing company, and we will sit down with them and go through this step by step and make sure that our expectations are met. Is your thought on this to just minimize the billing issue with the residents, so there's no confusion?
I was hoping to avoid the idea that somebody gets a $800 bill and then they get a check, or they've gotten a check, but the check was only for $400 from Anthem, and then have the city of Brentwood turn around and say, oh no, they disregard the $800 bill, we're going to bill you $400.
Yeah, so that is clearly something that we have to put in our education piece, because the part I can't answer tonight is I don't know how quickly our billing company will receive that EOB. I can tell you that they get a call, like if we run a call tonight and that report is generated and it's approved, QA'd, and uploaded, they get that bill, that report right away. And then I don't know exactly how long it takes them to get that out the door. That's the part I need to work with more, but I understand your point. And I would like to work it out to where we send them the invoice for what reflects the amount that their insurance is paying. So again, if it's our $1,000 bill and they've only been paid $500, that's all that's going to be on that invoice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions for Terry on this particular issue? I just have one, Terry. Once again, this is all coming through our third-party biller, right? It's not a letter from Brentwood. And then say they just refuse to pay. We just drop it? Is that your?
Well, our billing policy indicates that we can send them a bill and we can send them to collections if we know they've been paid by their insurance company. And when I met with staff about this, trying to get direction on which way we wanted to present this to you all of us in the staff meeting discussed the collections and just felt that it wasn't the right thing to do. But, you know, I work for you all. You all need to give us direction if you feel differently on that. The policy indicates we can send them to collections. The question is, do we want to? It's only 18 trips in one calendar year. I can't say what that'll do on a normal year. You know, will it double, triple? I don't know. That's something we're going to have to see as we get out of COVID. it may be something we could tweak down the road. Start off with this and go one direction, and then if things become much more increased, the call volume's higher or whatnot, and this number rises, then we could reconsider that. But you all, I want direction from you all on how you want us to approach that.
Well, my only yeah, I don't know if we want to take residents to collections, but I think in the past you have brought different individuals to us on trying to work out deals that have gone through collection that I guess have been non-residents.
That's right. And most of the time when I bring something to you, it is through an attorney's office that is working on behalf of their client, and they have received a settlement and are asking us to accept lesser amount of payment for our bill. And it's general. I can't say every case, but I believe I'd have to go back. Most of them are non-residents when that occurs.
I just, I just don't know if we need to show some consistency.
But those people are going, yeah, I mean, they're going to collections up until the point where, if they get legal counsel and they receive that settlement, that's when I bring those to you guys for approval to write off.
Okay.
So.
Well, then I guess if you can, maybe at the next meeting or a future meeting, if you could get more details and bring it to us.
Yeah, I'll work with the billing company and see exactly a few more details on this invoicing issue. Are there any other specific things that you would like me to get information on other than that?
No, I think David's questions were good, and I don't have any unless anybody else does. I guess that's it.
Well, I understand his question, and I will work on trying to make sure that that's the case, and report that back next month.
Sounds good. And you get additional items?
A couple simple things here. Just want to report you guys on some structure fire activity. We had a garage fire on Lawndale on the 13th. It appears that was started through the use of a burn barrel that got out of control and started some ground cover on fire and lit the neighbor's garage on fire. Good news is it was out quick, minimal damage, a little bit of siding, maybe a 2x4 or 2, but that was really it on the garage. Nobody was hurt. On the 25th, on Monday, we responded for a house fire in the 9100 block of Madge Avenue. Neighbor called it in. It appears to have been an electrically started fire through a bad receptacle on an exterior wall of the house. The renters that lived there noticed an odor early in the morning. A little bit later, smelled smoke, saw some smoke. It seemed to be a little more intense. And then by 9:45, the house started filling with smoke, and it got worse. And I guess the neighbors saw it once it got a little oxygen and got out and started free burning on the back of the house. Good news is we knocked it down quickly, and I think that the smoke damage inside the house was minimal. There was one area of the basement that was hit pretty hard with smoke damage, but I think they'll be able to do the electrical repairs, fix the siding and whatnot, and get back in the house relatively quickly. So just want to report on those. And Alderman Lockmiller, to your point recently, another one in Ward 3. So seems to be the hot spot.
It does.
So, and lastly, I was honored to hear about this. I received a call from Amy over at the Brentwood Chamber, and she indicated that the fire department was going to be their 2020 recipient of the Volunteer Year of the Year Award. Normally it's they select an individual, but this year the board selected the fire department. It was based on all the community activities that the fire department has put on throughout the year. And so, I am one little player in this whole process. I just want to make sure that everybody knows how many people were involved in this, from the elected officials supporting us day in and day out, from BOLA's approvals and support, and from the police department. Our firefighters got local, union local. It's an honor to be selected, and I'm just very proud and thankful for everybody's help.
Congratulations, Chief.
Thank you.
Any questions for Chief Curtin. I just have a quick one. Going back to COVID, you mentioned there's 26% of the employees in your memo. They say that choose not to or could not receive. Is there
Mhm.
someone that's choosing not to take the vaccine?
Actually, at this moment, there are, yes.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know why. Because I haven't asked that question, but we offered it to everybody, and right now it's not mandatory, and they selected not to.
Well, and I'm not a labor lawyer, but if they choose not to and they come down with COVID and they can prove that it was work-related, are we all of a sudden using Slate to pay the bills for this individual that chose not to?
Well, my answer to that is we had the individual that's still out, that we have a documented call that he was exposed on, and we're paying those bills currently, but that was before the vaccines. Right now, nothing's been brought forward to me that it's mandatory or how to specifically address your question in terms of what's the next step.
Okay.
Alderman Lockmiller, there
Yes,
will be an item on the Ways and Means Committee agenda for further discussion. Whether the city wants to consider making it mandatory, and if not, they're talking to the city's Labor Council. They are recommending that forms be distributed to employees if the committee were to accept that, indicating why they are choosing not to be vaccinated, whether it's for religious reasons, so there is a religious exception, or if it's for medical reason, so that we are able to track and document that. So that's an item coming up next week for Ways and Means.
Okay. Good. I'm happy to pass that along to Sonny.
Thanks
All
a
right.
lot.
Hot item. All right. Thank you, Chief.
You're absolutely welcome, sir.
All right, we'll move on to Public Works. Dan, got a couple items?
Yeah, the item that I included in there is, I know Chief Spees already kind of talked about it. It'll help twofold. So it's Litzinger Road was one of the areas that we were asked to consider plugging in the traffic data collector. So one, we'll get traffic volumes and data for folks that are going east of McKnight. So it was placed just west of Mount Calvary's driveway. So it's between Park Ridge and Parkside on that north side. But it captures data for travelers going both east and west. That was deployed last week. It'll be up all this week and probably the majority of next week. Typically, I'll put it out there for 10 to 14 days. So I calibrated it. I looked at it today. It seems to be working fine. And again, it's to collect data. If we were to do any improvements to McKnight, how would that impact eastbound Litzinger? Would cars get off that were going northbound and then head eastbound? I know Ladou's going to be looking at westbound on Litzinger going west of McKnight as well as north and south on McKnight. And then the other thing was to see if there's any validity to the folks that are saying that they're speeders and, you know, large trucks and things of that nature. So just looking at what the data shows so far, you know, the 85th percentile speeds are 34 miles per hour. The posted speed limit's 25. 50th percentile speed means, you know, half the cars are doing 30 miles per hour, the other half aren't. But the average speed is 29.7. If you look at the almost 16,000 data points as of whatever it was, like 5 p.m. when I ran it. And there's roughly 2,500 to 2,600 cars per day that travel that stretch. So we'll have more information at the next meeting. We can write a report like we've done in the past so that you can kind of see, you know, are there speeders? I mean, right now it shows that there's a small fraction, you know, a few percentage points of the total, but nothing too crazy. You know, there's one data point that was 51 miles per hour and a 30 or 25, but most of the data points are well below or right at the average. I don't know if you have any other questions. Like I said, we'll bring a full report to the next meeting.
That'd be perfect. If there's no questions, we'll move on. The consent agenda is just made up of the minutes from the last meeting. I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All right, moved by Sunny, seconded by Pat. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, on to old business, and I think you're back up, Dan, with the update on Rosalie.
Oh, yeah, and I did have one handwritten note here to remind myself, which I forgot, but now I saw the handwritten note. Under a department report, Bullet asked about the street lights for York Village. So just jumping back to that real quick, for York Village, I've got 2 locations that so far seems to be approved. So that would be Northcote near Sussex. That's at the north end, closer to I-64. And then 54 York Drive, which is located near Southcote. That's, again, towards the north end. 69 York, I spoke with the gentleman. He said he prefers not to include a light at 69 York. He's an attorney, and he said that he would prefer to get paid for it. And I said, well, we're not paying, it's part of public safety, and we would still have to pay TWM to do the easement. So the city's out thousands of dollars. I can't give you money on top of that. So he asked that I contact the neighbor across the way from him, which is at 38 Middlesex, which is at the corner of Middlesex and York. So I'll contact them. I have not yet, but that's my alternate. And then 10 York Drive, there's been no response for that empty property. I'm looking at 9 York Drive. If they say no, then I would let that go away. And then number 14 York Drive said no, but 18 is still in play. So I guess my point is, if 2 of these drop off, we could entertain that York Hills Drive, because as Alderman Plufka mentioned, those are controlled by the trustees, and then you'd get your 5 points to have TWM survey and be done with it.
Thank you. I don't want to. Yeah, I don't want to belabor this. I thank you very much for bringing that up. I'm kind of embarrassed about my neighborhood to some extent, but thank you for. Thank you.
I've got 2 yeses and 1 on the fence. So
yeah.
But what I hope is that 3 of them will say yes, and then the other 2 would fall into the hands of the trustees, and then we just put the 5 in whenever we get the easements signed off on.
Precisely. Yep.
So that was it for jumping back there. And then bouncing forward to Rosalie under old business. I know we did a report back in December, but basically we collected data on Rosalie since there were concerns about speeders and volume and things of that nature. So a little bit of the report deals with that. So I pulled some of the information from the previous report. So, and this is the stretch between Brentwood Boulevard and Swim Club. So you're looking at a little over 1,000 vehicles per day, anywhere from 1,180 during the work week to 1,069 on Saturday, Sunday. There were folks, going in excess of the posted speed limit, which is 30. And then I tried to put it in perspective, 1,000 vehicles a day, is it a lot? It's kind of like when people tell you your cholesterol and you're not a doctor, is that a good number? Is it a bad number? So I tried to explain in empirical terms. So the 1,000 vehicles a day, there's 800 vehicles per day in the 8928 area of Pine. And then there's roughly 830 vehicles per day in the 9347 area of Pine towards the west end of town. And then Annalee, we've run the data collector out there, and 470 vehicles per day on Annalee between Madge and Litzinger. Strassner, 4,840 vehicles per day near Memorial Park. And then more recently, Litzinger near Mount Calvary, that's like 2,600. So 1,000 is higher than most normal streets, but it's not, damaging to the pavement or anything. It's not totally ridiculous. It's just higher than you would expect on a street like that. So just wanted to bring that up. And then regarding what we could do, I know we're going to get into that later on with the next item as far as traffic calming, but some of the things we were kind of jumping ahead or having folks want us to do something on that street, but we've not had a form turned in. So if you look at that neighborhood traffic management program, there is a petition that needs to be submitted by a resident that's living on that area of concern, within that 1 block area. We haven't had that, but I know the straw poll indicated there are 6 people that support doing something on that block. So if any one of those folks want to take the initiative, we could certainly get it into the queue. And then as far as recommending anything in the near term, I would say no. So that's why I included the information on here is, we've got the sidewalk project. I spoke with Horner and Schifrin. The final plan should be done February of this year, which then go to MoDOT for concurrence and approval. And then once they give their approval, say that's in March, then we could advertise for bids in early April. Then we get the bids back, we go back to MoDOT, look for concurrence, so that we could start the project, say May, June, get our concurrence. And then it would go through the summer and then wind down by, say, September. So you don't want to do any improvements in that area, I guess is what I'm getting at, because it's going to be construction for sidewalk. And then MSD, we signed off on the resolution for easements. They're going to be improving that area of Rosalie as well as, White Avenue, Bridgeport. So there's going to be a lot of interactions on that first block that should slow people down. Now, what we could do before we go too far into construction with either of those projects would be to put in one of those LED illuminated stop signs, basically at Swim Club and Broughton Park, that area, so that cars that are going east-west on Rosalie would see the stop sign and hopefully make a complete stop. Because depending on which direction you're coming, you could be coming up over a hill, and if you're unfamiliar with the area, you're going to come right up on a stop sign. And if you're going over the speed limit, it's a little more challenging to slow down before you reach Broughton Park if you're going eastbound. So if you wanted us to, we could swap out the current stop signs for blinker signs or blinker stop signs. We've got budget in the sign budget. If we wanted to purchase those, we'd get quotes. They're roughly $1,400-1,500 a sign. But they're solar powered, so it wouldn't need any additional power or anything special. It'd just be swapping out the post and putting those up if we wanted to entertain that.
Okay. Dan, isn't there? You may have mentioned this, but you froze up on me. The MSD project, is that going down the middle of Rosalie?
Yes and no. That part of it does, like a small stretch, like right by the post office, and then it sweeps into the alley between the post office and the empty lot on the south side of Rosalie, and then it continues down the alley until it hits about the corner of City Hall, and it ties into an existing box culvert.
Okay.
And it extends up the alley, like past that church, all the way past Mobile on the Run and Starbucks. It's a pretty significant project.
David, did you have a question?
I did. I just had a comment and a question, I guess. Reading the report, and thank you for putting it together, it strikes me that the complaints, even though they haven't been formally introduced through the traffic calming program that we set up, it seems like the complaints had more to do about the speed with which people were traveling on that road. And I wonder if rather, I take to heart your comment about not doing anything to the road surface while we're under construction. But what about the placement of electronic speed limit signs? The ones that will tell you what your speed is, encourage you to slow down. We've had them on Pine. We've had them on McKnight. What about deploying one or more of those in this area of Rosalie in this year, 2021, even though we can't or shouldn't perhaps move forward with speed cushion deployment in the summer because of the construction? Maybe we could at least do something like that.
We can. We do have an extra one. If you recall, we were, instructed to purchase 2 of those. So one of them went up on High School, between Madge and Litzinger. And then this extra one, it's still in the box in the back of Public Works. So we could power it up and put it out there. We would just need to call in utility locates before we'd put in a post. But I would recommend, if we're going to put that up, that it would face so that people going westbound, because that's the side, the north half is where people don't park, and that's where you tend to see higher speeds because no one's parked in the road, and you can kind of, once you go from Swim Club heading towards Brentwood Boulevard, pretty much haul up and over that hill. So we can find a spot for that. And it also gives you data while it's in use too. So it's like we can go and at least see what westbound traffic's doing to compare it to what numbers we already ran. Hopefully you'll see a reduction.
Yeah, that was just a thought. I'm not saying not to do the other things we've talked about, but I just thought, given the report and given the complaint, maybe.
Yeah,
this
be at
was not-
relatively no cost, just the cost of a post and some hardware, because we already have the sign and we already have the software. So
David, you want to make a motion to do that?
Sure. I'll make a motion that we place a sign consistent with staff's recommendations for that electronic speed limit in that block of Rosalie.
Second.
Yeah, I think, sometimes we can just do small things first and see if that solves a problem before we run to, these speed cushions. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? All right, Dan, you've got your recommendation on that.
Yep.
We'll move into the last item, I believe, is the traffic calming toolkit. I kind of asked for a review of this, and I think you've got some things you've put together, Dan.
yeah, what I tried to do is look at it in terms of kind of like sewer lateral. What are our comparators doing? Are we doing something that's unique or different, or are we following the rest of the group? So I put together, one of the last things just beyond the recommendation is a table. So if you look at that, you can kind of see that we are kind of unique in the sense that of the comparators, there's only like 5 of us that have an actual written program. So Brentwood has one where you see yes, Baldwin, Chesterfield, Clayton, no, Creve Coeur, yes, DePere, yes, and then Kirkwood, yes, Richmond Heights, yes. So most of them are no's. There's just a handful that are yes. And then I included those different programs as an upload. So if you wanted to look, probably the most elaborate, if you've had a chance to look at, would be Kirkwood, and then probably a close second would be Creve Coeur. Kirkwood goes as far as to have an actual committee that's part of traffic calming. So I think there's like 3 members that help implement different phases of their program. Ours isn't quite that convoluted, but it doesn't mean it's bad. It just means that there's a little more, I guess, regimented. But one of the questions that we were asked was, do we even need a petition? And I would say yes, because everyone else requires a petition. They're slightly different in the sense that, say like DePere, it needs to be signed by 10 or more households. I don't know what their streets are like, that I guess they have greater than 10 households on a street. Some of ours, they should have more than 10 if it's a 1 block area, but, we use a percentage, and most use percentage, or at least half of them, I guess, use percentages. Ours is 67%, Richmond Heights, 67%. Creve Coeur is unique because you originally need 75% in direct relationship to the area. So we need, in our case, 75% on Rosalie, but then before you implement anything, you need 25% indirectly signing off on it, which would be, in our case, like a Eulalie or something. They would have to agree to it too. So that would make it a lot more difficult to implement anything. And then as far as like evaluating after you do the improvement, you can kind of see that most of them are like anywhere from a 6-month to an 18-month window. Once you put this in, you want to monitor it after so many months and see, did it give you the results you're looking for, or is it, making something detrimental where you need to remove it possibly? Then the other thing I looked at was, do these other comparators have a means of mechanism to remove a device, once it's put in? And they all do. Some of them are, the city council can say remove it. Some are, that there needs to be a petition by the same percentage of people to remove it, things of that nature. And then switching gears to actual traffic calming deployment criteria for, just like speed cushions and things like that. I looked at, that's underneath the background, but I looked at some of the criteria that, others either look at or that we've looked at. So in Creve Coeur, they have some emergency routes that the Creve Coeur and Chesterfield fire departments have looked at, and they just flat out say that you can't put anything on certain streets. So like Ballas Road, Bauer Boulevard, Conway, Craig, Emerson, things of that nature. Those are emergency routes. They don't want them impacted at all, so they won't even let you do anything. There's a moratorium on those streets. And again, they all require a formal submittal of the traffic problem with a notification form. There's the submittal of a petition, That varies a little bit. And then we, as well as others, look at like a schedule for street improvement. So if we're going to mill and overlay something this year or next year, you're probably not going to deploy anything because you're just going to have to remove it in the next year or two. Traffic volumes, almost all of them have a threshold. Ours says 1,000 vehicles per day in that NTMP handout that's uploaded as well. Some go as low as, say, 600 vehicles per day, but you really do need to have some sort of threshold. So if it's a very low volume street, you could always, reject that request because it's just such a low volume. It doesn't make sense to spend thousands of dollars for, 400 cars or something. And then through streets, they should be through streets, like your dead end streets, say like a Salem or something. It probably doesn't require traffic calming since there's only so far you can run around. Or a Barnstable or Mary Kay, they're just little cul-de-sacs. And then we also really need to look at the actual geometry to street, the length and width, whether it's got on-street parking, how it impacts snow routes. And then last but not least, do you have enough right-of-way? You can't put an improvement on property we don't own unless somebody's going to give you permission. I know in some cases, some of the comparators, if citizens accrue the money, they can pay the city to put an improvement in, which is kind of unique. I don't think anybody would go for that around here, but that is an option in some of those cases. So this was just to kind of give you a broad brush understanding of what we have and what others have. And I don't know if there's any suggestions or changes you'd like to implement. The one thing I thought with the speed cushions would be we can develop a checklist, and basically have in there that it's a through street, how many vehicles per day, so that we're transparent as to why it would be accepted or not accepted. Nobody has that yet, but it doesn't mean that, we can't be the first.
Well, we're getting hit up a lot with this traffic calming, but if what you're telling me, and I'm not against the petitions, I think there ought to be some, we worked on this for months, some citizen engagement if they want something done on their block. But you're telling me that we've really never had a petition put in front of us?
Not for Rosalie. For others, we have, yes. So like for example, Pine at Hatton, remember there was a petition for a stop sign. Then Lee Cannon did a work order and said, no, it doesn't meet the criteria for a stop sign. But I know that the individual had gotten signatures. I have it on file. And that was one of the reasons why I chose that area for the speed cushion, because it's like, well, something was asked to be done. Nothing could be done per MUTCD and common engineering practice. However, that was one of the areas I looked at. And then we've had other petitions. There was the one at like where Eulalie and Rosalie intersect there to put in a three-way stop. But instead, we chose to put in the flashing radar speed limit sign. So as you're heading from the town back towards Hanley Road, you swing by that sign. So we have had petitions. For Rosalie, I'd like to follow the program and have someone volunteer to fill out the petition and the request.
I agree. I mean, the reason I wanted to look at this is because I just thought that I didn't want to really change if you're looking at the flow chart, but I think this committee needs to be inserted somewhere in this process.
Mm-hmm.
Once you've made some type of decision on what you think's best, come to the committee and run it by us for approval.
Right.
Or would you look at inserting that into the flow chart?
Yeah, we can update the flow chart because in the past, that's what we've done with the memo. Like before we implemented the radar enabled speed limit sign, we brought it back and said, hey, we don't recommend doing a three-way stop. This is what we recommend. And then there was a motion in the second to go ahead and make the purchase. So we can update the flow chart to kind of mirror that, hey, we gather this information, we come up with a recommendation, but before a decision is made, it goes back to the committee and then it's, implement or don't implement.
What do the other members think? Sonny?
I'm liking where this is going. My critique has always been, be data driven, how do we decipher the ground noise from the signal? I mean, I am surprised to learn that there was never actually a petition filed by the people on Rosalie. I don't like the let's just leapfrog over the process and put in something, even if we've paid someone who's told us that that's not recommended. So I mean, if this is a whip work in progress, I mean, I'm in favor of it, and that we were ultimately transparent and we ran the traps on whether to implement a recommended traffic calming measure. So, I mean, it doesn't look like we're at a finished product anyways, but I hope we can improve it, and that way we at least have a good process in place to evaluate properly, people who want to put a stop sign on every corner and a speed cushion in front of every house, to address that. So I like it.
Bola, is there, instead of, I'm sure if we mess with any step in this flow chart, then it's a policy change. Right?
Yes.
Is there a way that we can have oversight, this committee have oversight without really throwing this policy or changing this policy at all?
I think there's an opportunity for Dan, when we receive this request, to bring it back and provide that information to the committee. He would also include it in his weekly departmental report so that you all would be in the loop. And if we follow those two opportunities to share that information, then we would know if you would like to direct us in another manner or reconsider some other part of it. So, yes.
Okay. Anybody else? Pat?
Yeah, I think, there definitely ought to be a request from more than one person on the street. And it ought to be a formal request for the city goes through all this.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
Yeah, if you look at the petition stage of this, I believe, Dan, you said it's got to be 67%, 2/3 of the block, the residents on that block.
Right.
So if they don't achieve that, it's pretty much a dead issue. Correct?
Right. Yeah, and they can always reapply. According to ours, they can reapply 2 years later because maybe, people have moved out, new neighbors have moved in, maybe the new people moving in have children or some other reason that they want, this implemented. So it's not like it's dead forever. It can be reignited, a couple of years later.
Well, maybe I got the power as chairman to just say, Dan, we want to know as these petitions come in, what stage you're at along the way and report to the committee during your report.
Yeah, and we can always send you the petition too, because then that would be a record, put it in either a weekly report or bring it to this committee. Anytime that there's a petition, if there's one on Rosalie, then we could just upload it and that way this is when it was submitted and then where are we,
And you could give us, as these come in, you can give us a status on, I mean, you've got up to a 2-year process here. I think we could probably get to it faster, but,
Right.
We'll at least know the steps of the way where you're at on different street locations.
Right.
All right, well, I guess we may have solved the problem unless anybody else sees anything I'm not seeing. Okay. All right. Dan, thanks for putting all that together.
Yeah, no problem.
Informative. Looks like we have no new business. Hold on a second. Kelly, we have any citizens left joined in?
There's a citizen in the gallery, but no hand raised to speak.
Okay. Still no.
I make a motion to adjourn.
I
All
have,
right.
I
Pat,
have
you-
one question. I have one question for Dan before we adjourn.
All right, go ahead.
Dan, do you have any update on the lights for Brentwood Forest?
I don't at this time, but I can bring one for the next one. I'll just write myself a note.
Okay, yeah, I get asked, so I have to ask you.
Yep.
Sure, we'll get that on the agenda for next meeting, Pat.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, we have a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Bye.
One opposed? All right, thank you, everybody.
Oh,
Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
All right.